Good morning, everyone. Our session today will kick off in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be kicking off in the next minute. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Finian Nally. I'm head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions with Actionpoint. You're here today to hear the topic on the secure remote worker. I'd like to thank Shannon Chamber, in particular Liana and Helen, the team in Shannon Chamber, for organising today's event. This is part of a series of webinars that Shannon Chamber are running, certainly over the last number of weeks, but also there'll be many more into the future. So please keep an eye on your emails and on the Shannon Chamber website for future events. Like I said, I'm working with Actionpoint, and we're here to discuss the secure remote worker. So before we kick off, for those of you who don't know about Actionpoint, Actionpoint is an IT and software company based in Limerick. We provide digital transformation services around both cloud and on-premise infrastructure. We also provide managed IT services, not only in the cloud, but also on-premise as well. And we also deliver custom software development solutions to a wide range of businesses, both large and small. So today's agenda, what are we all here to talk about? We're going to cover a number of things in the context of the secure remote worker. We're going to look at what does today actually look like, the balancing act that is out there for all our businesses. What are the real threats? And we're going to try and distill that down into 4 distinct areas. What immediate steps you should do now? What should you actually start to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are some of the key actions you can do immediately? And looking further ahead, maybe into the medium term or longer term, what does the future of your IT environment look like? I'd encourage you to use the questions facility in the webinar box there. So if you have any questions, please put them in the box throughout the presentation today. And then at the end of that, we'll have a Q&A session. And between myself and Helen, we'll hopefully answer any of the questions that you may have. So the first thing we want to talk about is the balance that's there across multiple aspects. The first of those aspects is user expectation. So I suppose if we think of all of us on this call today, we all have an innate technology expectation. Many of us are using Netflix, we're using WhatsApp in our day-to-day lives, we're attending webinars like this. And someone only said to me recently, the person I've seen the most during lockdown has been the DPD or UPS driver because I'm doing so much online shopping. But in all of those systems, we have an expectation that they're going to work really, really well. They're going to work instantly. The sign-up process or the process involved in either that shopping experience or that online application experience is seamless and easy for me as an end user. So my expectation for modern technology is, very, very different to what's actually the reality from a lot of business technologies. In addition to that, with the Balancing Act, we're also looking at the regulation that's out there, the requirements that are on our business. Some of that is across, ISO, PCI, and various other certifications. A lot of it is along the lines of GDPR and other standards that come out. And as well as that, depending on our industry, We may have other requirements in there that we need to follow from a regulation, competency, certification, CPD point of view. So many other things that are feeding into our business. Again, taking away the focus from actually what we need to do or what we're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. Feeding into that is loosely termed hackers or bad actors seems to be the new name for that kind of thing, in terms of people trying to compromise our data, people trying to get access to our systems, and people trying to, I suppose, make life difficult for us and profit off our business. So that's feeding into the balancing act as well in a very big way. And if we look at the trends that are defining work today, really there's four kind of high level trends. The inclusivity, for the first time in the workplace, there's four separate generations in the workforce. Our organizations are data rich. 50% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And if we look at our own organizations, the volume of data that we see increasing on a day-by-day basis has never been seen before. 72% of workers will work remotely by 2020. I think the reality for an awful lot of businesses now is that 100% of their workers are working remotely. But when we go back to what people are calling the new normal, which we still don't really know what things will look like, I think the expectation for a lot of workers will be that remote working is part and parcel of how they work. People no longer want to have the commute to the office. They no longer want to waste time traveling back and forth when they can be just as effective working from home. So the future of work and the future being right now and over the next number of months is very different to what it was even going back to January of this year. And also vulnerable. Thousands of businesses are attacked every day, and that's another one of the key trends that we're seeing. So we have that balancing act, the balancing act of the expectation that people see, the balancing act of the regulation of bad actors, and the way we now work, all feeding in together when we think about how we remote work. But if we look at our business and if we look at the platform that we're actually building on and how we're actually delivering that remote work, often that platform is just good enough. It's been put together over the course of a number of years, probably not updated that much. We'd have a lot of legacy back office systems. We'd have a question mark as to what is our technology strategy? Is it to update things when things break, or do we have a much more broader strategy to help technology enable our business? And we see an awful lot of fragmentation in there as well. And that's been fundamentally compounded by the nature of work, specifically over the last 2 months. Remote working has been somewhat forced upon many businesses, and we've had to adapt to that very rapidly. And in that, it's created a lot of disjointness. Again, that we have that generational ability, not only from an age profile, but also from an ability profile within the business, that people are expecting things to work a certain way or have never been trained on how to use certain systems. So we get a lot of disjointness. We also get a lot of people creating what's called shadow IT. In other words, figuring out things for themselves. So maybe we've given an end user, a remote worker, a new laptop, and we've told them, well, listen, go home, go to work, do your job as normal. But we actually haven't given them the tools to work effectively, to share data with their colleagues, to share data externally, to collaborate effectively. So they're going off piece. They're going back to those tools that they know work. Well, I know my Gmail can share things. I know my WhatsApp can do video calls. I know a Dropbox can give me access to files. So I'm going to use them because our business won't give me the tools that I actually need to be very effective. So all of these things are feeding into the security conversation. Given all of this going on and given all of that sprawl across our business, how are we actually delivering a secure platform? The reality is we're not, and we're leaving things open for those bad actors. And if we look at all of that, how do we start to distill it down? And this is a theme I'll present throughout this presentation, is that we want to try and distill it down. We want to try and make things very simple. So the first questions we need to start asking are, right, how do I give employees access to critical on-premise applications when they're at home or when they're outside the office? How do I protect them, from the likes of phishing and various other attacks? How do I make sure that the devices that my employee use are not only effective, but they're also secure? And how do I keep my data confidential? But fundamentally, while asking all of those somewhat technology-related questions, the one thing that's at the center of all of that is the employee. If we're not delivering a great experience to our employee, if we're not matching or exceeding the expectation that our employee has from a technology point of view, ultimately we're going to be left in the same position where people start to go off-piste and they start to use other tools and services, again, circumventing all that effort we put in to try and make things better for us. So that kind of sets the scene to say, okay, well, there's a big balancing act going on there, but we need to try and deliver a much more effective solution. So what are the real threats that are out there? You know, we could talk for days on ends about the multiple variants and types of threats, but we want to try and, again, summarize it and distill it down into 4 key areas. First and foremost, passwords. Passwords are frustrating. Everyone hates passwords. You know, I can't remember it. I've gone on holidays for 2 weeks, or even I've taken a long weekend off and I struggle to remember my password. You know, often they're not secure. They're expensive for a business insofar as people forget their passwords so often that they have to contact IT, get them changed. We also have to have passwords for so many different systems, be it my day-to-day login, my email, my accounts package, my payroll, my CRM system, etc., etc. And even this morning, I took a step back and said, well, actually, I wonder how many systems do I have access to, or, you know, do I have login details to? And when I factored in all the personal systems from, you know, my ESB, my Vodafone, my Aer Lingus, my LinkedIn, my Facebook, as well as all the core work systems I have, there was 80 systems in total that I needed to remember passwords for. That's impossible for any one individual. So it leads to weakness in the passwords. Phishing is obviously huge, and again, we're going to go into much more detail on this in a little while. But phishing is targeted, it looks real, and if we think about where we are today, you know, there's 2 trains of thought on this. People are at home, so they're more relaxed, they're in a more comfortable zone, and maybe less aware or less clued into what's going on. So if a phishing email comes in, the chances are that they're going to click on the link or do something untoward. The flip side of that is that often people working from home right now are more stressed. They're dealing with the kids, they have to make lunch, they have to do various other things, and really they're trying to be productive but don't have the time to examine an email a little closer. So again, that threat vector is very prevalent, and even more prevalent right now. Devices, another big area. You know, is my device a personal device or is it a business device? And actually, what do we mean when we say a device? Often there's been the approach to say, well, a device is a laptop or a desktop because that's your work equipment. The reality is most people can work from any device right now, from a smartphone to a tablet to a laptop, you know, even down to wearables are coming in, and work-related apps are coming into my Apple Watch and various other things. Also feeding into that is who else is using it. You know, again, working from home, am I giving my phone to my kids for half an hour while I'm on a phone call with my colleagues, or while I'm on a video call with my colleagues? Is the tablet in use by everyone in the house, and at the same time I'm trying to do a bit of work on it? Again, we've no idea what's actually going on there. And the last piece of that puzzle in terms of the threat vector is our data. You know, where is our data? What's it in? You know, is it on a phone? Is it on a USB key? Is it in a Gmail account? Is it in a Dropbox? Data right now has become so easy to move around, and again, bringing in that expectation that users have about how they can transmit data back and forth. We as a business are struggling to contain the data and struggling to keep things together. So let's look at some of those areas in a little bit more detail. So the comment I heard recently is that only hackers love passwords. You know, everyone else hates it, like I mentioned earlier on, because passwords are frustrating. And if we look at the stats that are out there, 81% of breaches leverage stolen or weak passwords. That's huge. So compromised passwords are the biggest cause of those kind of breaches. And how do we know what's out there? How do we even realize that, okay, well, are our credentials, you know, good, bad, or indifferent? Or maybe I'm somewhat apathetic about the whole thing and say, well, actually, I know our credentials are good, and I know, you know, our details haven't been compromised. One website I'd encourage you to look at is a website called Have I Been Pawned? So Have I Been Pawned is a website developed by someone called Troy Hunt, who's a security researcher from Australia and also a Microsoft regional director. What Troy did is he looked at what's publicly available out there, lists of password, lists of breaches, all of those kind of things. And he brought all of them together centrally. Obviously anonymized the data, and there is no actual sensitive data in everything that he's gathered together. But he's brought together approximately 9.5 billion stolen credentials right now. And what the website allows you to do is to see that have your credentials been stolen. So, for example, if I look at my own credentials here, I've been working with Actionpoint for almost 4 years now, so I've been very secure about everything I've done. You know, our business has a highly secure policy around identity management and all of those kind of things. So there should be no way my identity has been breached. But I can actually see, well, my identity or my email address and something to do with my identity has actually been compromised on 2 sites, Apollo and some PDL customer site. Now, I have no idea what either of those are, but a part of my identity is out there and in the wild on it. That's interesting. If I look at, for example, my personal email address, which I've had for 15 odd years now at this stage, I can see that, okay, it's been breached on, or it's been pawned, or my identity has been out there on 12 different sites. You know, Adobe, I recognize that. Dropbox, I recognize that. Paddy Power, I recognize that. Last.fm, so lots and lots of sites. So what I'm seeing here is that typically the username and password which I've used in these sites has been taken, has been breached. So if I'm still using that username and password, if I'm specifically the password part in my day-to-day logins, you know, I wonder, is someone else trying to compromise my system? Is someone else trying to take that password and maybe try to get access to other systems that I may use, or that people might predict that I use? So the reality is our identities are most likely compromised in some shape or form, and we need to take the view that, right, our password on its own is no longer good enough. Often when I'm having these conversations, people say, well, actually, we enforce complex passwords. You know, we tell people to change their passwords every 90 days, and you know, we ensure that they have capitals and numbers and symbols in their passwords. The reality of what that looks like is, you know, someone types in a password, their pet's name, and they put in some symbols in there and they put in one variation of that. Chances are, if I'm using, you know, up to 80 different applications, I'm probably going to use that password somewhere else along the line. And 90 days time, when I'm prompted to change it, what am I going to do? I'm going to add the number 1 at the end. 90 days later, I'm going to add the number 2 at the end. So fundamentally, our complex password, or what's been perceived as a complex password, in reality isn't complicated. You know, if it's out there in the wild, it can easily be taken and used, and people can easily guess variations of passwords. And systems have become so effective to target passwords and brute force attack passwords that passwords on its own are no longer good enough. And in a little while, we're going to go into more detail as to how do we address that. Again, looking at phishing side of things, and some of the stats out there that we've seen, the increase specifically in phishing over the last couple of months has been dramatic. And it's targeting everyone. It's targeting not only individuals, but small and medium enterprises as well. Even the World Health Organization had reported a 5-fold increase in attacks on their own staff, but they've seen scams across many, many industries. Europol are reporting almost on a daily basis about the types of attacks that are coming in there. Our own Garda Síochána is reporting on it as well. And we can see by some of the email and the craftiness of the emails that they look very, very normal. They look mundane, and they look like, okay, here's an email from the World Health Organization about the new safety measures. That looks, you know, interesting, and that looks like something that is genuine, but ultimately it's not. And again, thinking about the complexity here, people often say, okay, well, it's just a phishing email. People should know what that is and know not to click on it. The reality is phishing and the types of phishing is quite complex, and you know what's actually happening under the hood is much, much more sophisticated than we think about on a day-to-day basis. A typical phishing campaign has 5 key phases to it. One is reconnaissance, where we're actually looking at what's going on before we actually do the attack. So maybe a business has been profiled, you know, what are they, a finance business? Are they a legal business? You know, what are they actually doing? Who are they dealing with? The attack then leads to an account compromise, and then from that account, other accounts are compromised, and ultimately either data is taken out of the business, or that business's identity and user's identity are used to for financial purposes, to take money or make money in some shape or form. And really, we can see a broad attack spectrum in here, from scams that are just blasted out there to very, very focused and detailed scams that are, you know, focused in on individuals, targeting a CEO based on their public profile out in the internet, targeting a CFO, targeting your business based on who you are actually dealing with. So they're becoming more and more sophisticated, and very, very difficult for not only technology, but also for people to realize or to see that it is an actual phishing attack. So this is prevalent right now. Next on our list was devices, and this is something I've spoken about a lot recently in terms of the perception of devices. So often with a business, we say, okay, well, we've a new employee starting, or maybe we have an employee whose corporate device isn't working anymore, and we need to get a new laptop. So typically our scenario is we phone up our IT provider, we say, hey, we need a new laptop, and we'd like that set up for a new employee, and we want that with our normal setup, obviously encrypted, we want antivirus on it, and we want a profile set up and this type of configuration of it. And that laptop loosely would be €1,000, and there'll be a few hours of setup associated with getting that device ready for the laptop. In the same vein, we want to give that employee a smartphone. And what we do typically in that process is we phone up 3 or Vodafone, hey, we need a new Samsung Galaxy for that user, or a new iPhone, and that gets posted out, and we hand that device straight to the end user without any setup, without any thought as to how that device is considered. The reality is with that device, it can run Teams, it can run Outlook, it can access files, it can do video calls, it can edit documents, it can share information. It can do pretty much everything the laptop can do or everything our desktop can do. So when we think about our devices, actually we should be thinking in a very, very broad spectrum. Every device within the company, and I mentioned wearables earlier on, and we're kind of bridging into that scenario where wearables actually are coming into that, corporate device spectrum as well. But we want to make sure that we're looking and considering every device and not leaving things out into the wild. For example, if we are leaving things out, if we are not putting in effective protection on those devices, who's to say what apps people are putting on the devices? Yes, I have my corporate email on my mobile phone, and I have my OneDrive, and I have my file access, but I also have a number of games on it for my kids to use, again, to keep them occupied, or even to keep myself occupied, or for a bit of downtime thereafter. And if we see that, look at the volume of malicious apps out there, it's huge. We see Google regularly doing cleanups on the App Store. We've seen similar things in the iOS store. But also, if we think about our own attitudes and maybe historic attitudes towards IT, to say, well, actually, on our desktops, on our laptops, well, we're going to block the installation of applications. We're going to make sure our end users cannot install anything on that device. We're going to make that secure. The reality is, to sign up for the vast majority of applications in the modern world, we don't need to install anything. If I want to sign up for Netflix, for example, I just go online, put in my credit card details into a browser, and within a matter of minutes, I can be watching a movie on Netflix. I can do the same for Dropbox. I can do the same for Gmail. I can do the same for a CRM or an ERP or an account system. Apps can be set up by an end user in a heartbeat very, very easily, and everyone is very, very comfortable with doing that. So again, the conundrum that we have around devices is that while we may have tried to put a level of security in siloed in a certain place, the reality is that's no longer effective, or it's no longer good enough. And the last area we need to consider in those threat vectors is data. Where is my company data right now? We mentioned it earlier on. Again, people trying to do the work, trying to work to the best of their ability, but they're using the tools that they know work and work effectively, because they've realized that the Office tools that we've supplied them with are just completely ineffective. So they're using WhatsApp, they're using Gmail, they're using Dropbox and various other tools. But we're getting to a point then where, as a business, we have to ask, well, where is our information and what is it? Is it containing personal details? Is it containing commercially sensitive information? Is there IP in there? Is there confidential data? And are we heading on a path where we're going to be contacting the Data Protection Commissioner and saying, actually, we need to report a breach because we simply had no idea what was going on? So considering all of that, we've looked at our balancing act, the struggles that's going back and forth there. We've looked at the 4 key threat areas. What action do we need to take? We now know that there is probably a lot not right with our own setup. There's probably a lot of improvements from a security point of view to make. But how do we start taking action? How do we, as business owners and leadership teams within business, really start to take action? First is to realize that our approach to security is outdated. And the old way of thinking about security, between saying, well, if I have a firewall, if I have antivirus and a bit of backup, I'm good. The reality is we're not, because we've seen the scenario now where people are working from home, they're working from various locations. The way they work is very different. The apps that they use is very, very different. So we need to change our mentality fundamentally and say, well, actually, those outdated security approaches, while still important, are just not good enough anymore and just don't cut it anymore. Next, we need to ask a few questions. So do you know who is accessing your data? Is it an employee accessing your data? Is it a client? Is it a partner? Is it a Gmail system? Is it a Dropbox system? Who is accessing the data? Next one is cybersecurity a board or management level agenda item? And this is something we see an awful lot of the time, where we ask this question, well, actually, in your board meetings or in your management level meetings, do you discuss cybersecurity? And often we get the reply back to say, oh, we're not techies, we're not technical, so we don't discuss it. We leave that to the IT people. The reality is, we're all technical right now. And again, going back to that user expectation, we have an expectation from a consumer point of view as to how things should work. So we should be bringing that same knowledge into our business and saying, well, actually, let's open a cybersecurity question. What are the risks? What are we doing about devices? What are we doing about data? What are we doing about identity, etc.? Next question, are you using a modern IT solution or a modern IT platform? And that's really important. Again, that user experience and user expectation, as well as the foundational security elements underneath. If we're using legacy systems or using effectively the same approach and the same applications that we've been using over the last 5 to 10 years. And in all honesty, nothing has changed. We're using email, and we have a network file share, and we have a couple of applications, and that's how we run our business. And when people are outside, maybe we use a VPN or something like that. The question remains, well, you've used that same setup for the last 5, 10 years, but technology has evolved so much in the last 5, 10 years. Are you really giving an effective platform to your employees, not only from a usability and productivity point of view, but ultimately, how are you making that secure? Next, can you protect your data? Can we actually protect our data? Because we have to assume that people will work the way they want to work. And if we're not giving them effective tools to be effective in their jobs, our data is going to go everywhere. But can we protect that? We need to have the knowledge that even if we give the best of tools, people will still go off piste for various reasons. But fundamentally, we want to protect our data. And lastly, do your users love their work experience? Do they actually like what they're doing in terms of, are you giving them effective systems? Do they come to work going, oh no, I have to use this archaic system yet again. I'm going to have the daily battle of trying to communicate with my colleagues. I'm going to have the daily battle of trying to get work done effectively. But I'm here spending 8 hours for work that should only take me 4 hours because our systems are so cumbersome, because they're not modern, because they're effective. So again, in terms of the actions that you should take today, right, here's 5 questions to start off with and to start that conversation around your IT platform and its cybersecurity. Building on from cybersecurity, how do we start to make it simple? How do we start to box things into key areas? So there's 4 key areas that we always like to discuss or like to start off with. First is securing the front door. So again, looking at our identity. Second is securing devices, making sure we're encompassing all devices. Next, securing our content. What are we doing about the data? Where is it? And again, throughout that, as I keep saying, giving that great employee experience. So if we can start to say, okay, well, let's sit down with a pen and paper and let's start to look at what's the reality today, not only in asking those questions from the previous slide, but also saying, right, actually, we need to secure the front door. We need to secure our devices. We need to secure content. What are we doing there? And how are we modernizing our platform? One of the ways many businesses are choosing to modernize today is using Microsoft 365. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on Microsoft 365, but fundamentally it's addressing many of those security concerns we've highlighted, but at the same time delivering a great and modern experience to people, allowing them to work effectively together, to collaborate, to not only video conference, but to work on files at the same time across any location, across any device, but from a business point of view, enable it to work securely. So in other words, have secure identity, have secure devices, and have secure data, while at the same time making it very, very easy. And if you are using Microsoft 365 already, one of the actions that you can take today is to check your level of security within Microsoft 365. Simply go to security.microsoft.com and it will give you your secure score. So it'll give you analysis of all the security that you could enable on your particular tenant, but most likely haven't. Typically, we see a score in the 20s to 40s for most people, simply because they haven't looked at security effectively and said, right, we're not introducing phishing protection or identity management or device management. But a lot of those features are easily accessible. While there might be some technical complexities in actually activating them and enabling them, fundamentally from a user point of view, they're not invasive and they do give a better overall experience. Tomorrow's actions. So, we've sat down with our pen and paper, we've realized the risks, and we've sat down and we've asked a few questions, and we've realized that actually we don't have a good handle on things. Our identity management is poor. Chances are there's a lot of passwords been compromised out there. We've no idea what's actually going on there. Our devices, we've never had a handle on the mobile devices, so we probably should do something about that. Our data, again, we've no idea where that is or where it's going to. Something has to be done there. And you're right, maybe our platform isn't as modern as many businesses, but you know what, it's just okay. And we're going to trundle along with it for a period of time. In that same vein, you got to ask yourself, well, what are your competitors doing? What is your industry doing? What is the expectation from your clients? If we're still adopting those legacy approaches, are our competitors going to be doing things quicker and faster and better than us? Are our customers going to have a better expectation of our competitors because they're using better technology and they have an innate knowledge that that technology is better, it's more modern, fundamentally it's more secure, therefore my data with that company is going to be much, much more secure. So what are we going to do tomorrow to start addressing the risks? Remote work starts with identity and access. So we're going to start to look at securing our identity. How do we actually start to do things? And the way we do that is using multi-factor authentication. So again, back to my point from earlier on, 81% of breaches leverage stolen or weak passwords. Using effective multi-factor authentication actually prevents up to 99% of identity attacks. That's huge. So if we think about it, well, actually, if our passwords get out into the wild, if they're on some website out there that someone can access and try and probe, or even if one of those 80 sites that I've access to gets compromised and further credentials are taken, by using multi-factor authentication, I really don't care about that, because if someone has my password, they're not going to have my second form of authentication. They're not going to have the app on my phone that generates a unique key, or they're not going to have the biometrics that I've set up in my laptop, or they're not going to have the USB key that I physically have to have with my device at all times in order for me to get access. So those numbers, 81% of attacks are stolen weak passwords, and 99% of them can be prevented with modern multi-factor authentication, is huge. And that's a huge step that we can take to address things effectively, or address the security risks for our business. And again, very, very non-invasive, but gives our employees the sense, well, actually, do you know what? Our business is now introducing modern authentication tools, or modern ways of authenticating, the same way my Gmail did 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Phishing protection is a big one. So again, how do we start to introduce tool sets? And one of those is what's called advanced threat protection. So it's not only looking at what's in an email, but it's also looking at the behavior of an email. So if an email comes in with a malicious link or with a malicious attachment to it, advanced threat protection looks at the behavior of that. What happens when someone clicks on that link? Does it go to a website as normal, or does it go to some other website and try to download and infect a system in the background? So very intelligently, advanced threat protection reduces the chances and the risk associated with phishing. And I'd like to stress that when we're talking about all this, it's all about reducing risk. There's no absolute in here. There's still a lot of other factors that come into play, but this is massively reducing the risk, not only to our business, but also to employees as well. Nextly, we want to start to secure and manage our devices effectively. Again, looking at the full spectrum of devices, not only saying, are we enforcing passwords and enforcing encryption on every device, no matter what they are, but also moving into modern ways of protecting our data on devices. And there used to be an old way of doing it called mobile device management, which was very, I suppose, plain and simple. We installed something on the phone. If that phone got lost, we would wipe the device remotely. What we've seen in a lot of businesses, especially where people are bringing their own devices and using their own personal devices, is that often there's a pushback on that. I don't want the business wiping my mobile device because I have the photos of my kids on it and I have a lot of personal details on it. I don't want them having that level of control on it. With modern solutions, we're actually able to do a lot more than that. We can say, actually, we welcome your personal device into the business, and we're going to allow you to have access to our corporate data and corporate apps. However, we're also going to have the ability to delete that corporate data and corporate apps and have full control over the corporate data and corporate apps, but have zero control over your photos or whatever other information you've in there. So we can get very, very granular with how we control our data and how we control access to our data across devices. And lastly, around safeguarding our data, we need to protect our data from accidental leaks. We want to control who has access to sensitive email and documents, and we want to start getting visibility into that, because I think that's really important. We need to understand actually what's going on in our business. While a lot of what we've spoken about right now is from the context of maybe there's bad actors involved, often, accidental leaks and accidental data logs are fundamentally down to employees not actually realizing what they're doing without any malicious intent, but they just happen because someone dropped their guard for a second and we didn't have the controls in the background to actually prevent that. So things that can help with that are simple things like policy-based pop-ups. Hey, I can see you're sending an email externally. Here's a little pop-up just to remind you to say, did you know you're sending this email externally with sensitive details attached to it? Are you sure you want to do that? Likewise, getting much more granular to be able to actually start to classify and label our data, encrypt our data in real time to say, well, actually, if an employee or member of staff attaches data to Gmail or Dropbox or something like that, we've confidence that that data is secure so that only that employee can access it and that no one else is getting access to that and it's not going off piste. But in addition to that, we're going to be made aware of that and we're going to be able to have the conversation with the employee to say, hey, we notice you used Gmail to transmit data, or you put some data on Dropbox. Why did you do that? What's the reasoning behind that? Is our platform not effective enough, or are you not aware of the solutions that we have in place already to actually share files and share them securely? So again, it becomes this early stage conversation, a much easier conversation to have with the team, knowing that you have the protection in place, versus the conversation that's at the other end of the spectrum, whereby a breach has happened and we're trying to scramble and figure out what's the risk or what's the exposure to the business. It's important to stress as well, it's not all about technology. Again, in the short term, and the actions that we can take tomorrow, there are two other key things. There's the people and the process that really come into things. And if we look at our processes, are they actually outdated processes? Are they just completely backward, time-wasting processes? Do I need to download a file from one system, transmit it to a number of employees, and then upload it into some other system after, saving it as a CSV and then converting it into some other format? And that process takes half a day, but in the meantime, I've got data in so many different places. Are those type of processes just completely outdated? Likewise with our people, and this is something I see on a very, very regular basis, there's an assumption of knowledge with our people, with our team. If an employee that's with the business 10 years, or even a new employee starts with the business, I assume straight away that they're going to know how to use Outlook, they're going to know how to use Word. Some of us are adopting Microsoft Teams, so yeah, I'm going to assume that they probably know how to use that as well, and I'm going to let them at it. And I'm going to spend 3 hours training them on our accounts package and another 3 hours training them on our CRM system. But we've never actually had the thought, and we've never sat down and said, well, actually, do people actually know how to use the core business tools, the file sharing tools, the communication tools? Do they actually know how to use them effectively? And are we as businesses delivering effective training to people, not only at a technical level, insofar as here's how you use email properly, here's how we use it within our business, here's some things you may not be aware about in sharing data, sharing calendars, etc. But are we also introducing those softer skills as well in terms of cyber awareness training? So far as well, how does someone know what a phishing email is? We expect them to know what it is, but how has someone actually sat down and said, here's what to look out for, regardless of whether you're at home or whether you're in the office, here's what you look out for. And we're going to have this conversation about what to look out for in terms of phishing emails right now. We're going to tell you what systems we have in place in the background to help reduce the risk, but we're also going to check in with you in 3 months' time and reiterate the risk and reiterate what needs to be looked out for and what's new, and have that continuous conversation. Because again, if we're not having that education process or having that continuous conversation with our people, there's the assumption of knowledge, and often that assumption can lead to a breach happening or something bad happening. So just as important as the technology aspects that I went through there, the people and the process are pivotal to this as well. So medium-term actions, where do we go from there? We're in a much better place now. We've taken action. We've decided we're going to note down the risks. We've put this as a board level agenda item. We've put in a plan in place to introduce multi-factor authentication, phishing. We've got a better handling on our devices. We're in a much better place now. What's next? What do we do? Well, really, we approach it in this kind of vein. We look at building a modern workplace and changing our mindset, changing our approach across people, process, and technology. We want to look at our people and start to identify digital leadership within the business to say, well, actually, we as a business, we want to be at the forefront. We want to be better than our competitors. We want to do things more efficiently. We want to get the most out of our team and deliver the best possible service to our clients, because that's what's going to set us apart from the pack. And the way to do that is to identify the digital leader and promote a digital first culture within the business. In looking at our processes, right, how can we improve our processes? How can we eliminate all of those mundane paper-based tasks that just take an age for people to do and are prone to error on a regular basis? How do we introduce that continuous cycle of innovation within our business and leverage that digital leadership within our business and spread that culture across our company? And lastly is technology, embracing digital innovation, embracing new tools, modern tools that allow us to, I suppose, change that process and allow people to work to their best of their ability. So to look at a couple of them just very briefly, some of the key tools that we're seeing right now that are introducing that modern workplace. First and foremost is Microsoft Teams. And we see the growth of Microsoft Teams, certainly with our own client base, but also within companies on a global basis, as being a complete game changer. It's rapidly accelerated in terms of its usage throughout the whole COVID-19 crisis, but ultimately would become I suppose, a central business tool, not only to allow people to communicate effectively on a one-to-one basis, but allowing people to communicate group wide across the business, but also to customers, have that video conversation, have that group video conversation with clients and with customers, and set the expectation that we're delivering a modern platform. Teams also allows us to manage work and collaborate on work effectively. So for employees to work together on the same document, on the same file, and to be able to work across different devices. Maybe I'm an office worker working on a laptop or a desktop, or maybe I'm a frontline worker that doesn't need a laptop or desktop, but I have a smartphone and I need access to critical pieces of information and to communicate with the central team. Teams enables all of that. So in thinking of your modern workplace transformation, Teams should be one of the central technology components of that. One other one to consider as well, and just to make you aware of, is around Windows Virtual Desktop. Again, you know, our old way of looking at technology was that, well, our servers and our systems have to be sitting in a corner of our office in a box that makes lots of noise, and we can see what's going on with it. The reality is, you know, in this modern remote working world, that box in the corner has failed to deliver on so many fronts. Failed to deliver from being a modern approach to IT, from being secure, from being easily accessible, and to match that user expectation. So using tools like Windows Virtual Desktop, we can actually centralize all our information securely on a platform that has security built in from the ground up. And it allows us to scale with our organization. So we're no longer reliant on, I wonder if that box in the corner will have enough capacity for my business to grow. Or actually, we bought that box in the corner last year, and now our business has had to downsize and we really have spent too much on it. Using tools like Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to deliver our applications and our data to our employees wherever they are and whatever device they're on, always in a secure fashion. So again, we're ticking that security box, we're ticking that user expectation box, and we're making things much, much better for our business as a whole. So in summary, what have we spoken about today? There's the now, there's the tomorrow, and there's the medium term. In terms of the now, putting things on the board and management agenda, looking at our team's ability, factoring in that the 4 generations across our business, putting together things like a risk register and new policies and procedures, and introducing continuous innovation. Tomorrow, start hardening our environment, looking at the multi-factor authentication, advanced threat protection, device management, but also putting a focus on training and education, making sure actually what is our level, what is the ability within the team, and how do we improve and increase that. And then from the medium term, introducing that modern workplace approach around people, process, and technology, and leveraging tools like Windows Virtual Desktop and Microsoft Teams. Again, underpinning all of this has to be a great employee experience. If we're not doing that, our employees are going to go somewhere else. We're not going to be attractive to our team. We want to make a workplace that is inclusive, that gives the best of technology and gets the best out of our people. And the way to do that is using the approaches we've outlined today. And with that, I know I've covered a lot there. We're going to hand over to questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the question box there. And between myself and Helen, we'd be delighted to answer them.
Finney and Helen here, thank you so much for your presentation. It was quite comprehensive. You make it all sound so easy. Maybe that's why you're working with Actionpoint. But you made some really the question that I have, and actually came through text as opposed to the chat room, is where do you store passwords, and is there any database or any software that you'd recommend that companies could consider?
So the foundation of passwords really, you know, from an IT point of view, is always Active Directory, and Active Directory is something pretty much every business is using right now today. The approach of storing passwords is a bad idea. We don't want to store them, you know, as much as possible. There are exceptions to this, and there are certain tools, password vaults and password managers, but ultimately, you know, we don't want to be storing employees' passwords. We want to, you know, if someone needs to get access to a password, the approach should be, well, we have to reset that because you've forgotten the password. But ultimately, like I was saying throughout the presentation, we need to have a system there that has multi-factor authentication enabled, and that reduces the risk around that. If we start to store passwords, you know, in password protected files, which is something I've seen from time to time, it's ultimately going to be compromised in some shape or form. So we want to try and minimize that as much as possible. We want to try and leverage the security investment that we have to date while enhancing that with multi-factor authentication. But sometimes there are exceptions to that, you know, old outdated systems that need passwords to be vaulted, and there are some third-party tools to do that.
And just to kind of expand on that, Finian, I mean, every organization has different platforms, and even the Chamber of Commerce operates websites, CRM systems, Sage accountancy packages, we all have different passwords. So you're saying there's no one-stop shop to store it for each individual, or is there a common password associated with applications?
Definitely, you want to eliminate common passwords. So we always want passwords associated with individuals, because from an audit and logging point of view, we know who did what when, kind of thing. So we definitely don't want generic passwords. If we're in a scenario where it's an absolute must that we cannot introduce on a particular accounts package, for example, we cannot introduce multi-factor authentication or nothing like that, well, we go back to basics. Yes, we enforce the complexity of the passwords. Yes, we protect the device. But we can use something called password vaulting. And again, that can be built into Active Directory to say, well, actually, we can store our passwords here, but the only way to access that information in the first part is using our multi-factor authentication. So a little bit technical there, and apologies for the technical response, but there are ways and means of doing it, but it's important that we look at the effective way of doing it.
Excellent, Finian. Thank you very much. And again, a question for me. A lot of companies have been forced into remote working, and that's a big challenge when you have to do it pretty as quickly as we've all had to do it in the last few weeks. So if you were to sit down with the company now, how would you start off doing a post-mortem to actually look at the risk associated with where they're at now versus where they need to be, and taking into account the whole GDPR element as well? Could you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, certainly. I think I've used this analogy on a couple of presentations recently. It's remote working in 60 seconds. Everyone in the space of a few sentences, when Leo Varadkar stood at the podium in Washington, everyone realized, okay, we have to adapt to remote working and we need laptops, and let's send them to our employees, get them out there. Great, remote working is done. The reality is that worked from a business continuity point of view to a certain degree. Generally, the employee experience wasn't great. But in doing a post-mortem, it's to actually look at those key systems and say, okay, well, number one, are we using a modern platform? What is there? What are the key systems that people are using? What are we trying to achieve as a business, and how are people working? So maybe we need to keep some of these elements, some of these remote working elements. Maybe they're perfectly fine, but it still always comes back to those kind of three things that I mentioned around the identity management, around the device management, and around the data management. I think if those aspects are addressed, and you said at the start there, I've made it or simplified it to a certain degree. It actually is quite simple to address a large part of this. It doesn't need to be complicated. But once we're taking in those three aspects, then we can move on to, okay, what needs to change? Maybe we've introduced extra security on a certain system, but regardless of how secure we make it, it's still a painful system to use. So therefore, we need to think about modernizing it. And what does modernizing mean? And what does that actually look like? Is it a changing provider? Maybe it's an accounts package that is very old and we want to look at a different provider who gives a much, much better experience. Or maybe we just simply need to upgrade a system to a more modern platform. So it's nuanced in there, but the basics are identity, device, and data. If we can put a better handle on them, we're going to be more secure. And then we can start to put an action plan in place to, I suppose, modernize things in the medium to long term.
Okay, thanks again, Finian. A question, I suppose, even more a comment. Very well presented. A written IT and internet policy document is really important, no matter the company size, especially for remote working. I know from speaking to a lot of the HR practitioners and consultancies, they've been working with companies to review the policies to ensure that they're managing that element of the new remote working kind of situation. Can you talk a little bit about the advice, or if you've worked on that type of business strategy with companies, Finian, or if that at all is something you don't do?
Yeah, certainly. I've had a lot of experience with that, and really the key thing there is number one, it's awareness that there's a problem is step one of the scenario. So it's good that so many people are actually having an awareness, are reviewing this, are seeing what's going on, and starting to take action. I think what's the next step on that, it's important to realize that those documents, those policy documents, have to be living documents. They can't be something to just address a compliance tick box and say, yes, we have an internet policy and remote working document, and that document sits on a shelf in someone's office and no one has ever read it. No one actually knows what it is, and it's 40 pages long. That type of approach is not effective. It's a box ticking exercise. So those documents need to be living. The employees need to understand what's in them. We as businesses need to understand that are those documents effective? Are they, I suppose, do they have that understanding of the modern way people work? And are we going to continuously review things and do that in collaboration with our team to say, well, actually, we have a new remote working document. Here it is today, and we realize we have these fundamental issues within our business because, you know, our accounts package or our CRM package is a legacy one. We know it's painful, and we know there are certain nuances to it with remote working. The business is committed to addressing that in whatever period of time, as well as that. Here's our expectation on you as an employee, and you know, we expect that your work device is your work device, and that you're not using it to play games with your kids on it, and those kind of things. So I think it's multifaceted in there, but I'd still go back to the point that it can't be a document that's just written to be a box ticking exercise. It has to be a living, breathing document that everyone understands and everyone is a part of creating on a continuous basis.
Thanks again, Finian. It was good to hear you talk about reputation, and I suppose reputation for employees and for companies and for their clients. Can you talk a little bit about cybersecurity and the whole governance piece? Because again, it's fundamental to maintain reputation, but also to attract new clients and to attract employees working in a company that has that, I suppose, big focus on maybe managing that part of the business.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that board level and management level item. You know, are we having that conversation around cybersecurity? And you know, I hear this on a regular basis. I think I alluded to it during the webinar that people often say, well, we're not techies, we're not the technical ones, so we're not going to talk about it. To be honest, I don't think that excuse is valid anymore. I think people need to make themselves aware. People need to start educating themselves on cybersecurity, not at a deep technical level, but awareness of the key threats, and be confident enough to pose the questions back to the technical people within the business, ask those hard-hitting questions on it. So I think good governance comes from the top. I think as well as businesses promote themselves and how they attract employees in is to advertise that they're using modern platforms like Microsoft 365, which I mentioned earlier on. They're the key business tools that most people are using, and even leverage them in the early stage of recruiting people to say, well, actually, you know, we can't have face-to-face interviews anymore, so I'm going to have an interview over Teams with a prospective employee. That immediately creates an impression for the company that this company knows what they're doing, they have a good setup, they have a good approach, but fundamentally it's led by good governance behind the scenes at a management and board level.
Excellent, thank you very much. I think Leona Lynch has put through a message to the organisers and panelists. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Finian?
Yeah, I suppose just to make you aware, Actionpoint, we do provide, the link is actually up on screen right now, we do provide training around cybersecurity and Teams and various other aspects. So certainly check out actionpoint.ie/academy. We'll be running a number of webinars around other aspects as well, be it Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams. And obviously the Chamber, I'm sure, Helen, you're running many more webinars that I suppose can help and be impactful to businesses in this day and age.
For sure. I think we're nearly webinar fatigued at this stage, Finian, but it was great to work with you guys from Actionpoint to deliver a very comprehensive presentation. And I'm sure we'll be doing some training through the Shannon Chambers SkillNet. So thank you, and Leona and your team, for actually engaging with Shannon, and actually for your ongoing membership of the Chamber. It's great to see you stayed on the bus during a difficult time with us. I just want to close off and just highlight two events that we're hosting. One is in conjunction with Lean Business Ireland, and tonight at 6:30, if you register on the Lean Business Ireland website, you'll hear Mick Guinea from EI Electronics talking around how he has managed to reopen up a business in Shannon that manufactures smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. He's now opened up a factory with 750 employees and currently extending and expanding their current facility. So that's an exciting story for Shannon in light of what's happening in Ireland and in the region. Another event is with Julie Cinnamon, the CEO of Enterprise Ireland. She'll be joining us for a conversation on a virtual lunch on June the 3rd. And that's not taking place in the usual location, which would normally be Dromone Castle Hotel. Unfortunately, it's taking place to go to meeting next week. So please join us for those events. Liana has joined us on this particular webinar, and she's organising a whole suite of training programmes through the Shannon Chambers SkillNet, and we've secured additional funding to support companies who have made, unfortunately, positions redundant, and the training being offered there is completely free of charge. for companies who are going through that unfortunate situation. We're offering very heavily subsidized training programs for training across different disciplines. So if you access the website, you can register or you can engage with Leanna and myself directly. Finian, thank you and your team for joining us here today. Look forward to working with you into the future. And I'd like to thank everybody who's joined us here for the 1 hour that they've allocated for this webinar. Have a good evening. Afternoon.